Good afternoon. This is Jeff, and I just wanted to do a quick sound check, audio check. If you could just type in the chat box, let me know if you can hear me okay, see me okay, and we will get started in just a couple of minutes. Okay, super. Thank you for the sound check, audio check. Sounds like we are good to go. We're going to get started in about 3 minutes. I like to start these right on time. I want to be respectful of your time, since many of you I know are probably the middle of your workday. Type in the chat box where you are dialing in from. I'm always kind of curious to know where people are, and I'll give a shout out if I can. Hopefully some hometown Chicago folks. So just type in the chat box and let me know where you are. Like I said, we'll start in just a couple of minutes. In the meantime, grab something to eat, grab something to drink. We got to stay hydrated even at home. Hello, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Tampa, Denver, Tel Aviv. Hey, Tel Aviv, Philadelphia, another Chicago, a bunch of Chicagos, New Jersey, Philly. Wow. This is an enormous turnout. I want to give people a couple minutes just to kind of get into the room. We did one of these a couple weeks ago, had about 1,000 people, and the feedback was terrific. So I decided to do it again. And I've updated a lot of the content, a lot of the information based on some of the questions that I got during that session. And so I anticipate the turnout today is probably going to be even larger. So terrific to have you all. And I appreciate you making the time. So we'll get started in just a moment. I'm going to grab something to drink, and I'll be right back. Okay. Wow. People still coming in. So I'm going to give people just a minute. But again, I'm your host, Jeff Hyman. I am based in Chicago, and this is live. This is as live as it gets. I'm here in my home office, as I'm guessing many of you are as well. And like I said, we did one of these sessions about 2 weeks ago. The feedback was terrific. And so I've taken some time, updated with the latest statistics, some late research that my team and I have done, and put it together to kind of make sure it's totally current. And over the next 60 minutes, I'm going to take you step by step by step through what is working right now, and in some cases, what has always worked, but what's working right now, who's hiring right now, and I think it'll be a very, very productive session. I will stay around as long as you like for Q&A at the end. I will take questions throughout if it's directly relevant to what we're talking about. So just type in the chat box as we go with questions. If I don't see it or if I don't get to it, I promise we'll get to them all at the end. I've carved out the better half of the afternoon. So as long as you guys want to stay on for Q&A, I'm more than happy to do it. So with that said, why don't we get started? Again, I'm Jeff Hyman. The turnout is insane. Atlanta, Germany, Chicago, New Jersey, Nashville, Orange County, Boynton Beach, Dusseldorf, Palm Beach. Wow. I am thrilled to have you all, and I'm very grateful for your time and humbled that you've taken the time to join. I think you'll find it to be a useful session. At least the feedback on the one we did a few weeks ago was terrific. And so I'm eager to get started. So why don't we do just that? We're going to start, and you are in the right place. If any of these apply to you, if you are actively looking for your next role, which I know some of you may be based on folks that signed up, if you're worried about your company's stability right now, which is very understandable, if you're thinking about making your next career move, perhaps you're graduating from school, graduating from business school or something like that, or maybe you're just thinking about, I need to make a move anyway. Maybe you just want to have more confidence and an actionable plan. And for those of you that know me personally, you'll know that I am actionable. I'm no BS. This is going to be a very blunt and direct session. And that's not meant to be alarmist. It's not meant to be disconcerting. It is meant to be as useful as I can be to as many people as I can be. So you're going to hear some no BS talk today. I might even swear a few times because I'm originally from New York, but I'm based here in Chicago now. And I called this the superhero job search. Why did I call it the superhero job search? Well, frankly, that's what it takes right now. It takes going way above and way beyond what used to work. And by the end of this hour, you are going to be able to get through your job search faster than a speeding bullet. Your resume, your LinkedIn, your positioning, your messaging, and your focus are going to be super powerful. And you'll be able to leap tall buildings. That's my promise to you. Type in the chat box if that would be helpful to you. That's the promise. I like to promise big and I like to deliver. So type in the chat box yes if you're with me and if that kind of information would be helpful to you. And I'm going to stay well hydrated during the session. Great. Everyone's typing yes. Awesome. So with all that said, let's do this. We have to approach this with a sense of realism, and I'm going to share that realism with you in a minute. But we also need to approach this with a positive attitude. And I don't mean to be cheesy or silly or, living in fantasy land, because I'm not. But if you believe you can do this, then I promise you can do this. I see people every day right now who have questionable backgrounds, probably less talent than yourself, and they're getting it done. But it does take a very different approach. In fact, I would say that generally speaking, your job search process, as I'm going to go through over the next hour, is going to be opposite of what almost everyone else does. It's going to be pretty counterintuitive. And I hope that will be eye-opening. I'll try to use data wherever possible, but I know you can do this. Let me give you 60 seconds about me, just so you understand my perspective. I've been a headhunter, an executive recruiter for 25 years now, as you can tell from the hairline and the gray hair. Inc. magazine called me the matchmaker. And in addition to being a headhunter, I've actually run and been CEO of 4 companies, which gives me the ability to understand what the hiring manager is thinking. I've hired over 3,000 people for my companies and for my clients' companies, which means I've interviewed over 30,000 people over the course of my 25 years. Not a fun task, I can assure you. And I've probably reviewed, 100, 200,000 LinkedIn profiles. I mean, something like that, and resumes. So I've seen this movie over and over and over, obviously not in the kind of circumstance that we're in right now, but I've seen what works. When I'm not a headhunter, I teach the course at Kellogg School here in Chicago on recruiting and retaining talent. That's based on the best-selling book that I published last year, and happy to give you a free copy of it if you like. And so this session obviously will be the opposite of what the book is all about, which is how to hire talent, but the same principles apply. And I'm going to help you make sure that you position yourself as a rock star, get discovered as a rock star, and be that rock star in your next role. So it's a tall order. We've got a shitload to do. Okay, so in the next hour, I'm going to lay out step by step how you're going to find it, where the opportunities are, companies that are hiring right now, and anyone that tells you that all hiring has stopped is wrong. I'm also going to share with you the biggest mistakes that I see people make, and people make them over and over. And I'm also going to talk about your LinkedIn profile, which is arguably one of the most critical tools in your job search arsenal. Your resume is important. Your background is important. Your haircut's important. All those things are great, but your LinkedIn profile is where it all starts in many cases. So we're going to talk about that too. So we've got a lot to do. Just to give you a sense that I've been in your shoes, because I don't want you to think that I'm some fancy pants headhunter CEO. As I was graduating Kellogg School many, many years ago, back when this hair was black, I somehow decided I wanted to work in Silicon Valley. And I wanted to somehow go from Chicago to Silicon Valley. No tech companies were coming to campus. So as I worked with the school, I kind of realized I was on my own. And I created an off-campus job search. I did it on my own. I targeted certain companies. I built a funnel and I closed opportunities just like a great salesperson does. And you are going to have to be that great salesperson to successfully execute this process. But I'm not going to ask you to do anything I wouldn't do myself. And it resulted in 7 offers. I took one. I wound up working at Intuit, which makes TurboTax and QuickBooks, and lived in Silicon Valley for 10 years. So anyone that tells you this can't be done is wrong. But I will tell you that don't expect anyone to do it for you, no matter what your situation, no matter where you may be. You have to pick up the reins and get it done. And that's because everything has changed. Everything has changed. And that has also changed how the job search works, how LinkedIn profiles work, and everything that you're going to talk about in interviews. It's all changed in 30 days. Obviously, we're facing this tragic health crisis, and we could spend all day talking about that. I'm not going to do that. But the health crisis has also created an economic crisis as a result of the government mandating a shutdown of so many industries, so many companies, and the ones that can continue to operate are now working from home, which changes everything by itself, including the job search process. You need to be paying attention, not just to the scary headlines on CNN about the health crisis, as sad as that is, but also understand the economic crisis and the impact on you. Now, part of the advice and counsel I'm going to give you today does depend upon your personal view on the economic recovery. I have my point of view, and I'll share that with you in a moment. You may disagree with it, and that's fine, right? Because no one knows. No one has seen this particular type of episode before. So you do need to make some assumptions, and I'll walk you through how to make those assumptions. But you got to start there. And if you think you are not going to be impacted, I would generally disagree. There are some people that won't be impacted, but hotels, airlines, restaurants, bars, they've all shut. Some will start to reopen, God willing, in a few weeks or months. Who knows? That's going to vary, but they are certainly not going to come back the way they were. Airlines are 10% full right now. When they get to 50% full, they'll still not be profitable. Restaurants won't be able to have as many people sitting next to each other, which means the revenue of the restaurant will be lower. Some still won't make it. So that's just that ecosystem. But what you need to remember is that has domino effects on the rest of the economy. So even if you're fat and happy sitting in a company that's not in those sectors, you need to be asking yourself, what impact on your business, on your sector, and of course on your job will that domino effect have? And we are just now beginning to see the dominoes fall. There is a lag to this. When you push on that first domino, it takes time to build momentum and for those waves to travel through the system. And of course, that's not just in the US, that's globally as well. So just to put some numbers on it, to put a fine point on it, our Treasury Secretary says that unemployment in the US could get to 20%. The St. Louis Fed says 35%. I have no idea where it'll be. My numbers tell me it's currently at 12 to 13%, well on its way to 15, 20 or more. It doesn't even matter what the number is. The point is, it's amazing. It's historic. And what's amazing in particular is how quickly it has changed. So sitting here 29 days ago, we were at 3.5%, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. You as the individual were the buyer. You had the world by a thread. You could get 3-4 offers in a week. All that has changed. All that is off the table. And the quicker you can adjust to the new reality and do so faster than others, and many still haven't woken up to the new reality and the new normal, the better off you will be. So that's what today's session is all about. Now, I describe this as an economic tsunami that's coming. And it's certainly approaching the shore, right? When I showed this a few weeks ago, people were like, nah, everything's fine. People are still on the beach in Florida. It's just a passing storm. This will be the most severe storm that any of us have faced in our lifetimes. And I've been through 3 recessions. So I've seen things similar, certainly not the health crisis. But you have a choice. You can hide, which is a natural tendency in this kind of situation, just duck and cover and hide under the desk, or you can actually do something about it and take action. And that's what I want to help you do. Type in the chat box if you want to hide or if you want to win. I just want to see one of those 2 words, hide, if you're just going to hide and hope this all goes away, or type in the chat box, win, if you intend to actually do something about it. Because I still see a lot of people sitting around hoping, and hope is not a strategy when it comes to a job search. Everyone said win. I guess if you're going to say hide, you might want to drop off the session at this point, but almost everyone has said win. Okay, let's keep going. This is what what history tells us. The blue sections are recessions. We are now in a recession by any measure. And I've worked through 3 of these, so I know a thing or two. I guess that's part of the joy of being old, is you actually get to see a bit of history and hope that you don't repeat it. But of course, there's been nothing like this, where we've gone from 3.5% unemployment to 15 or 20 or 30% unemployment in a matter of a month. Just never seen it before. So we're going to have to make some assumptions. That said, I'm not going to be all doom and gloom. I refuse to accept that. I'm an entrepreneur, an optimist. I believe in America. We will get through this. There's always, always, always opportunity in the face of these crises. Food companies who are struggling to keep up with the demand. Amwell and other telehealth and telemedicine companies that have seen their volume go up 20 times in a month. Zoom Video is a great example. Walmart and Amazon stocks are at an all-time high. The list is endless of point after point of economic activity and success and volume. Your challenge, of course, is to find that. And I'm going to help you do that, because it is, as I describe to people, a value migration, a job dislocation. It's not like all jobs are going away. We're not all about to be laid off. They're not going to shut off the lights on the country, although it kind of feels like that some days. But value is shifting from one sector to another, from one company to another. And you need to think through those implications. Now, I'll tell you that you may not like what you think through. You may think about it and be like, oh, I'm in trouble, and my industry is in trouble. And I will tell you that when faced with an economic tsunami, or what I would call wartime conditions, your plans, your dream may need to go on the back burner. And I don't say that very often. But having a port in the storm, having a safe place to be for the next 6 to 12, 18 months may not be the worst thing in your career. And by the way, you'll get a lot of pass from people later on why you made the decisions that you did. So I understand you have a plan. I'm not saying give it up, but be realistic about the timing of that plan, because you didn't plan on this health crisis or economic crisis. The key, though, is to have a plan. Most people that undertake a job search have no plan. By the end of this call, you will have a plan. When you have a plan and you execute the plan, you have the best chance of winning. Most people have no plan, or they get thrown off that plan as soon as they get a no or something changes. And we're going to see nothing but changes here over the foreseeable future. So your ability to keep calm, have a plan, and work the plan is important. Some of the mistakes that I see people making now and in previous recessions is they panic and they have no plan. They move to a competitor in the same industry that is facing the same issues. So the logic goes, I need to leave my company. The company's not going to make it. Well, who wants me? A competitor wants me. The competitor hires you, and you're still facing the same issues. So changing industries may make sense. Taking a job without doing due diligence, just out of desperation or out of panic, without doing your homework, can lead to a bad situation because of last in, first out. So if you're the new person with that company, if that company faces economic difficulty, likelihood is you're going to be going first because you're the last one in. Similarly, holding out for the perfect situation is a problem that a lot of people make. They're living in fantasy land. They're living in dreamland, and we're no longer there. People will spend hours and hours refining and perfecting their resume. It adds no value. I'm not saying resume is not important, but the resume is not going to get the job. And probably the biggest mistake I see people making is they just wait and see. I'm just going to wait and see. Now that comes to how your personal projection of how long this economic cycle is going to be. Now I've studied it inside and out for a month. My personal belief is that we're not going to see a material resurgence in economic activity, at least here in the US, this year. So that's 9 months. It'll start to show signs of life. And of course, as we get the virus well in hand with a vaccine, then of course things will potentially take off. Most doctors tell you that's going to be 12 to 18 months. So you just do the math, right? We may be released from our homes in a few weeks or months, but it's not like the light switch is going to go on. The planes are going to fill. The restaurants are going to fill. Your company's revenues are going to go back to where they were overnight. Probably not going to happen. Or you can assume they're going to happen, but if you're wrong, you got a problem. So you need to really think about your personal projection of how long this period is going to be. Remember, you do not need to outrun the bear. You just need to outrun the guy behind you. And there are a lot of people, a lot of individuals that haven't yet woken up to the new reality, the new normal. I talk to them every day. They're still living in fantasy land. And just the fact that you've chosen to invest an hour on this topic tells me at least that you're awake and alert and doing something about it. So give yourself some kudos because there's a lot of people that still think this is going to go away on May 1st. And they're in for a very rude surprise, I fear. The place to start as you start to think about your projection of how long things are going to take to recover comes down to two things you got to start with. The first is your cash burn rate of your company. And it shocks me every day how many people don't know the true cash burn rate of their company. Of course, the CEO and CFO know. That's their job. But no matter what your job, product manager, director of sales, administrative assistant, janitor, I don't care. You need to understand the current honest financial situation of your company. How much is in the bank and how much are you burning through? Now, if you're with a profitable company, you need to also say, well, our revenues might continue to fall, so maybe we won't be profitable. And then how long will that cash last? Companies that have the strongest balance sheet right now are going to do the best. And if your company isn't one of those, that tells you you're probably going to need to make a move pretty soon before this economic recovery ends. Now, if you're at Apple, $30 billion in cash in the bank, you're probably going to be okay. Doesn't mean that's a guaranteed, but you're in a decent situation versus a 10-person startup that's losing $500,000 a month and has $2 million in the bank. You can do that math. The second burn rate you need to understand is your household. We all have expectations. We all have requirements. We all have a burn rate. If you don't know your burn rate, if you haven't taken the time to study your numbers and, of course, remove anything non-essential, which by now you should have, then you don't understand how selective you need to be, right? So if I just, won the lottery, I can be pretty selective. I don't need to take a job. I can sit it out for a year. If I've got a rich uncle, I can sit it out for a year. But if you're like most people and your savings are not what they should be, you haven't built that cushion or your burn rate is just high, then you may not be as selective as you once were, which is what I was alluding to earlier, which is where your dreams and aspirations intersect with the reality that we find ourselves in. So you got to know these two numbers. If you don't know these two, you can't develop a plan and take action on it. We could talk more about that during the Q&A. As you have your plan, you need to make some assumptions. Hoping for the best, preparing for the worst is where I start. I'm a neurotic New Yorker, so I always believe in planning for the worst. As optimistic as I am that we will recover, we will get through this, our country will go on, mankind as we know it will not cease to exist, but it could be a while. As I've spoken with people, many CEOs over the past month, clients and otherwise, as I've read everything I can read, and I hope you're doing the same, it is reasonable to assume something pretty significant in terms of how your company, how your business is going to fare through this time, through this recession. Most people are convinced it's not going to be a V-shaped recovery, meaning it went down and it's going to come right back. Probably not going to happen. You might assume that, in which case you can disregard this assumption. But many companies are planning on a 40% reduction in their revenues for the next year. It probably won't get worse than that. It could. In some industries like restaurants and bars, it's down 100%. So this is kind of a generic assumption. You need to figure out your assumption. But if you don't have one, I would submit this is as good as any, because I do think it will be a material time period before things come back. That doesn't mean you will not get a job. You will. And we're going to walk through that next. Let's take off the table one thing, however. If you have a job, even if you're not as happy, as challenged as you would like to be, you should probably stay in that role. I don't say that often, but I do think if you have found that port in the storm, you're maybe frustrated, you're not thrilled, you're bored, maybe you don't love your manager, number one reason people leave a job, I actually would say that during this time period, you should probably think twice, 3 times about making a change. Remember, when you leave a company and join another company, it entails risk, because if your new company, your new employer encounters financial difficulty, and by the way, there will be companies that encounter financial difficulty later in the economic cycle. Others will come back. So, for example, Amazon and Walmart right now are doing terrific. Other companies are in trouble. That moves in waves and cycles through the economy. So if you join a company and it hits the rough patch as the new person on the block, you have a risk. So you better think twice about making a change right now. Now, if you're currently unemployed, you got nothing to lose, and we'll get to that. If you're in a tolerable role with a solid company, I generally would recommend staying put. Advice I almost never have given through my career, because I live from a place of life is too short. If you join a company that encounters difficulty, you remember that scene in the Titanic, everyone's scrambling for the lifeboats, only to find out there's not enough lifeboats. They have enough for the women and the children, but all the guys are left to die. That's the risk that you're taking by joining that new company. Now, if you've made the decision, I need to make a change, I need to make a move, or you're currently not working, maybe you're in school and conducting your own job search, we need to start with a target. One of the biggest mistakes that individuals make is they don't have a target. It would be the same as a head of marketing of a company not having a target, not having a target customer, and trying to develop marketing and advertising campaigns and hoping that they land customers. It would be that crazy. Most marketers will tell you the number one thing you do is figure out who is our target customer. Who are we trying to land? And I'll tell you that this is a big mistake that I see a lot of people make, is they don't start with a target. And I understand the psychology. The psychology is, especially in a down market, especially in a recession, I should be open to anything. I should look at anything. I can't afford to be that selective. I should, click, apply online all day. That's what most people do. And it works against them in so many ways. It works against them because it's a waste of time. It doesn't work. It works against them because they look like just everybody else. They're not focused. They're not prepared. It gives off a sense of desperation. It's just not a good plan. The plan starts with having a target. Here's how to come up with your target. I start with 3 circles in a Venn diagram. And you have to ask yourself 3 questions and look at the intersection of the answers. Question number 1, what are you a rock star at? Meaning, what are the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you are best in class? I believe we all have it. Some of us are lucky enough to know what they are. It might be convincing people and changing their mind. It might be writing. It might be designing color palettes, whatever it might be. These are things that you've received recognition for. People have said, oh my God, you're amazing at that, or that you have reason to believe you're amazing. That's circle number 1. Not above average, but best in class. Question number 2, what do you love the most? And that can fall into 2 subcategories. One are things that you love doing the most. I love getting into combative arguments. I love building financial models. I love drawing, whatever it may be. Or it may be things that you love, pets, food, whatever. So that's the second circle. The third circle, which is the most difficult, is in what ways can you create value? Even during an economic downturn, how can you create value? What will people actually pay you to do? I'll give you an example. If you had some knowledge in your head, as a gentleman that I met this week, about how hospital systems can move their ventilators and equipment around from location to location to maximize the usage of it, that is something people would pay you to do right now. Maybe not 5 years ago, maybe not 5 years from now, but right now people would pay you for that activity. That's value add. You need to figure out for yourself, what are those 3 questions? And you don't have 2 weeks or 2 months to do it. This is done by Friday. And it takes a lot of soul searching, maybe a couple glasses of wine, but you need to figure out what you're world class at, what do you love doing, and how the heck can you create value? Your dreams may need to be set aside for some time period, but this is going to help you find that port in the storm, that place where you can add value. And hopefully it turns out to be something amazing. Even if not, I can assure you it's not going to be the last job or company you ever have. Okay. In general, during economic recessions, and I've seen this during 3 recessions before, it falls into one of 3 categories, the people that tend to do best. And the more that you can position yourself as one of these 3 things, the better off you're going to be. And for some, this is super easy. For others, it's more of a stretch. And I call it makers, shakers, and takers. Makers are the people that create a product or deliver a service. Your company delivers some product or service, and without you, we couldn't deliver that product or service. Well, that's pretty valuable, right? Like revenue stops if we don't create the product and deliver the service. And by the way, I'm not talking about a software developer who's working on a product 2 years from now. That's a maker, but that's not a time-sensitive maker. A shaker is someone who sells stuff, right? And you don't have to be a salesperson. You could be the marketing person who fills the sales funnel, who fills the sales pipeline, who runs the Google AdWords account and drives cost-effective leads. That's a shaker as well. And then the taker, the person who collects and counts the money. Pretty important role in this situation where so many companies are going to be counting every penny they have. So the more you can position yourself in your Venn diagram as a maker, a shaker, or a taker, the better off you're going to be. And you're looking for the intersection of those 3. And this is not about what do you want to be when you grow up. This is not about career counseling. I'm not a career coach, nor do I want to be one. But I'm telling you that until you start with a target, you have nowhere to go. So type in the chat box while I grab a sip if this makes sense so far. And then we're going to peel back the onion and go to the next layer and the next step. So again, just a recap. Makers make the product. It could be a software developer that's shipping SaaS that's going to be released next week. It could be the person on the assembly line that's building ventilators. Those are makers. Shakers, salespeople that close the deal, marketing people that are tied to lead generation and things that bring in money. And takers are people that count the money. Could be collections, accounts receivable, the controller, etc. Okay. I encourage you during this time to think about an MVP, a minimum viable position. 30 days ago, as the individual, you were the seller. I'm sorry, you were the buyer. Yeah, 30 days ago, you were the buyer. You had your choice. The companies were the sellers. You might get 2, 3, 4 offers in a week. I saw it all the time as a headhunter. Things have changed so dramatically that the pendulum has swung. We've gone from 3.5% unemployment to 13, 15, 20% unemployment. You are now the seller. The company is the buyer. So you need to think about what is your minimum viable position that you may be willing to accept. It may be a port in a storm. It may not be your dream position, your dream industry, your dream role, your dream title. It may not be your dream compensation. But it's a stable company in a stable sector that's going to be here 6 or 12 or 18 months from now, that has a balance sheet and a cash runway, or both. And when you find that role, I encourage you to think twice and 3 times about passing it up. I'm not talking about settling or just grabbing something or taking a crappy job, because you control that threshold. You adjust it. What I am encouraging you to do is to think like you never have before about, what am I willing to accept? Something's going to have to give. If it's the right role, it's going to be in the wrong company or the wrong sector. If it's amazing compensation, it may be with a company that has a balance sheet that's in trouble in 6 months. It may be the perfect title, but the compensation isn't where you want it to be. Something's going to have to give. The situation has changed. In 30 days, you're not going to find the perfect job unless you're just incredibly lucky, but luck is not a strategy. So you set that threshold. You decide, what is my MVP? And I encourage you to think about finding a role that, even if it's not your exact target, your exact hope, that at least it's a growth opportunity, right? Maybe you're not going to have some fancy title, the best compensation, the sexiest industry, but you're going to learn a shitload in the next 6, 12 months. That will turn out to be an investment in your time that will pay results later. Okay? So at least take something where you're going to grow in some way, shape, or form. I have a motto that you have to be learning or earning. And if you're not going to be earning, at least make sure you're learning something. Now, a lot of people have asked me in the past 2 weeks, as I've been giving this advice, what are people going to think about me a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, when they look at my resume? I went to a top school. I was on an amazing career trajectory. And then I took a role, and people are going to be like, what were you thinking? I'm here to tell you that you are going to get the biggest hall pass in the world a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. People are not going to care. They're going to understand that you did what you had to do to keep your career progressing, to continue your learning, to find a port in the storm, to generate income for your family. Now, your logic has to kind of make sense, which is why I'm encouraging you to have a plan. But do not take a role or not take a role because of what someone a year or 3 or 5 is going to ask you. That is not a good reason to pass on an opportunity. Pass on it because it doesn't clear your MVP. Pass on it because you're not going to learn anything. But don't pass on it because you're worried that someone one day, some headhunter might say, what were you thinking? Your answer is going to be, I was thinking about the biggest depression since the Great Depression. That question's just not going to come. So let it go. Now, I see questions coming in. I'm going to keep rolling. I promise you at the end, I'll stay as long as you want for Q&A. Okay? Let's keep rolling. As you think about companies and sectors to focus your time on, I encourage you to go back to Maslow. Now, if you didn't study Maslow, and I got a C in Psychology 101, but I did take away one thing, which is this, and that is the progression of needs that people must have met. When we start, At a base level, we're worried about the basics: air, food, water, clothing. Then we worry about our safety, our property, our health, having a job. Then we worry about love and friendship, all the way up to, being all you can be. In times of recession and economic cutbacks, both by individuals and by companies, we go right back down to the bottom of the pyramid, and then we start again and then build back up, right? So that's just natural psychology. It's human behavior. So as you think about your current role or your current company, ask yourself if this is a vitamin or a mineral. Do you sell something that people have to live? That is a medicine. It could be a B2B SaaS package for companies that rely on it. It could be you sell healthcare products that people must have every day or every month. That's a medicine. Or do you sell vitamins? People can do without it. If you're that seventh streaming service, if you're that SaaS package that no one really needs, or the app that charges monthly, but it's kind of not that important, people are going to begin to cut those expenses if they haven't already. And those who are at the top of the pyramid, you want to migrate towards the bottom. So think about that in terms of sectors. Now, I've done an analysis over the past 3 weeks on who's hiring and where. And I'm not going to take you through every one of these, but it doesn't take much to understand that some industries are booming right now, or they will be booming soon. Let's take some examples. My favorite is the sin industry. This is alcohol purchases. They have doubled or tripled in the past month. Marijuana purchases, CBD. Social networks have never been busier, because that's how we're all communicating. Zoom, other kinds of video platforms, telemedicine and telehealth. We can't go to the hospital. We can't go to the doctor. Everyone is rushing to telemedicine, telehealth. Education is going to go through a huge revamp over the next few years, as is working from home and all the products and services that enable that. People aren't going to buy new cars and new homes, but they're going to spend money on repairing their cars and repairing their homes. You're going to need lawyers, because there's going to be a ton of lawsuits that come out of this cycle. There always is. So the list is endless. Importantly, you need to also think about companies that tie to these companies, right? So there are, social networks. There are video games. There are, transportation companies, but then there are consulting firms and all kinds of companies that feed these companies. So think about the chain. Think about the dominoes that we talked about earlier. And similarly, I'm not going to show you in a chart, but there's all kinds of industries that are not thriving right now. And you probably know what those are. So that's why I wanted to show you ones that are. So don't believe anyone who says all jobs are gone, everyone's laying it off. It is a value migration. It is a job shift. If you don't want to be a bagger at a supermarket, fine. I'm not telling you to be one, but understand that the supermarkets, the CPG companies, are booming. They are struggling to keep up. And there are vendors and all kinds of companies that serve them that are also super busy and doing super well, and probably will for the next couple of years. That is the nature of an economic cycle. Your job is to think through those domino impacts. So we've talked about the sector, the industry to focus on. Now I want to move to where should you focus your search geographically. What I'm finding very quickly is that it's working best in two areas. One is in your current town, in your current city. Now, you may be tempted to say, well, we're interviewing via Zoom video, so why does it matter? The answer is companies that are hiring are already telling me, as their headhunter, that as soon as I can meet these people, I want to meet them in person. Well, just getting a flight is going to be difficult. You deciding you want to fly is going to be difficult and expensive. It adds up. Companies are not going to wait because they're at 15% unemployment, which means there is a ton of talent available. They don't need to wait for you. So I'd encourage you to think long and hard about doing a long distance job search. I understand you wanted to move to California, you want to move to New York, you want to move to Dallas. Great. You may not want to do it right now. Not to mention, you may not be able to sell your home. You have to find an apartment. which is going to have its own set of complications, this may be the time to kind of hunker down geographically. The second option is the opposite of that, which I see working, which is 100% virtual companies. These are companies like Basecamp in Chicago that have been virtual forever. They have been relatively unimpacted from a work style standpoint by COVID. So that would be the other option to think about. Even if you're not living in your dream city right now, like I said, something's going to have to give, and it may have to be location for the next 6, 12, 18 months. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of water, getting a little dry. Type in the chat box if you're with me. Just type yes, and we'll keep going. And I promise we're going to get to all the questions at the end, as many as you want. Type in the chat box if you're good to go so far. Okay. Great. Everyone's with me. Awesome. Okay. This chart used to be opposite. 30 days ago, this chart that I showed people was opposite. You would think about what your next role needs to look like. And then you would think about who in my network would tap into that role. I would encourage you to flip it on its head right now. Even if you think your network stinks, even if you think your network sucks, even if you regret that you didn't build your network when you had a chance, even if you didn't dig your well before you're thirsty, and I hope you never make that mistake again, you have an amazing network. I almost never meet someone who doesn't have a network that's so much deeper than they even realize. So I'm going to take you through now how to figure out your network. And the reason is your network is 90% probability, 90% of how you're going to find your next role. Don't count on your school to do it for you, your spouse to do it for you, your clicking on apply to do it for you. LinkedIn ain't going to do it for you. It's your network that you already have, and you can't dig it now because what you got is what you got. You're going to work with it. But let's talk about how to do that. This may feel very mechanical, but you need to understand that it's how you're probably going to find your next role. Start listing out tonight your network. And let's talk about who's on that list. Every manager you've ever had, even for a week. Every mentor you've ever had, which may be a peer of your manager who wasn't your direct manager. Every peer you've ever had at every company you've ever worked in. You were head of marketing, you had your head of sales, head of finance, head of manufacturing, head of operations. If you were an investment banker, you had all your buddies and all your peers. If you were a trader, everyone on the trading floor. List out every name you can possibly think of and use LinkedIn to rattle your brain if you need to. Former investors in your companies, especially those that did well, where the company made the money. They're quite useful because they're investors in other companies, as are board members, also are board members in other companies. And even if you didn't know them very well, even if you met them at one meeting, if you made them money, there's a reason for them to connect with you and talk with you. Former customers of yours, if you were a consultant, it would be your clients. If you were in sales, every one of your customers, every one of your prospective customers that you couldn't close, but you had a great relationship with. Former vendors, if you're in finance, if you're in accounting, every one of your vendors, if you're in manufacturing, all of the companies downstream. When you start to really think about it, it starts to be a long list. I find most people, when I go through this exercise, it's hundreds of people. Add to that all of your first degree LinkedIn connections. Now, you probably haven't gone through this list in ages. Now's the time to do it. Now, if you're like most people, there are people in your LinkedIn connections that genuinely are connections of yours. They would take your call. They know who you are. And then there's probably some other people who, you met once in passing at a trade show and you accepted their LinkedIn invite. Yeah, they're first degree connections, but probably not going to be that useful. I'm going to add to this one other item, which I forgot, which is all of the students that you went to school with, both undergrad, grad, maybe they're currently in your class, they go on the list too. So when you start to think about this list and really push yourself, I bet it's 250 to 500 to 1,000 people. I know that sounds crazy, but if you take the time and really do it, you're going to be shocked. It's not going to be 12 or 20 people. Here's what I then would recommend you do with that list. We're going to do something with it, and that is to prioritize it. Where do we spend our time? And there are 3 categories that this falls into. The first, literally list them out in Excel or a Google Sheet. And the first is, does the person know me? Meaning, would they take my call? Do they know who the heck I am? Not, I met them once in passing 10 years ago. Second, do they love me? And by that I mean, do they think highly of me? Do I have reason to believe that they think I know what I'm doing, I excel at my craft, I'm intelligent, I have my act together? That's the second column. Third and final is, are they in a position to hire me or to introduce me to people who could hire me? That might be a proxy for, is it a senior person or a junior person? Do they run a company? Are they on boards? Are they an investor, etc.? I would recommend keeping this super simple. Don't overanalyze this because you want it done by Friday. 1, 2, 3, or 1 to 10, whatever you want. Add up a total score and you're done. Sort it tops down. And now you're going to have a prioritized list of who in your network of all these people is going to add the most value and be most likely to introduce you to your next role. Now, why did I say 90% chance? Because even under uncertain circumstances, 80% plus of jobs are found through a personal network. Headhunters are a tiny percentage. Job boards are, including LinkedIn, are a tiny percentage. Schools are a tiny percentage. Most job changes in the United States, at least, are through your network. During economic downturns, it becomes even more important, 90% plus. So this is an activity worth doing. Type in the chat box if you're going to do this. Just type yes if you buy it and you're going to spend time on it over the next 2 days. Type no if I'm full of it and you're not going to do it. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I've heard a lot worse. Just type yes or no. I'm going to grab a sip of water. Okay, most people, yes. A couple of no's, that's fine. If you got a better plan, I encourage you to stick with it. Okay, let's keep going. So 90% chance that you are going to find your next role through this list. 90%. I see this over and over. Work your network. That doesn't mean you have to schmooze or be awkward with them. People understand right now that we're in the biggest economic crisis in 100 years. Be bold, be concise, and we'll talk about how to do the messaging in just a few minutes. Okay? Now you've tapped out your network and you still haven't found it. And by the way, tapping out your network should take some time. This is the second piece of the puzzle, which is to keep you from doing what most job seekers do, as I alluded to earlier, which is talking to any Tom, Dick, and Harry, chasing down any lead, clicking on apply all night long. That is not a job search strategy. In fact, it doesn't work. Here's what works. Create a target list of 30 companies. I call this your Focus 30. They are 30 companies, only 30. They're not 10 because I want you to have enough ammunition, enough leads in the pipeline. If you're a salesperson, you know you need multiple leads in the pipeline because you don't know which one is going to close. But I also don't want you to have 300 companies in the pipeline. It's too many. 30 I have found over the years is an optimal number. They are either local in your town, either where you are right now, where you're sitting, or they are 100% virtual or largely virtual. They hire people who are remote. I would encourage you to focus those 30 companies in those 2 buckets, local or virtual, and in stable growth sectors, as we discussed earlier. Don't spend your time on companies that are in LA if you're in New York, unless you are under some crazy circumstance, in which case you have to move. It's not going to work. Unlikely to work. Also unlikely to spend your time on sectors that are laying off people left and right and are maybe not even going to make it. Don't spend your time on those companies and sectors. Focus on companies where you have an unfair advantage, meaning you know stuff that would be helpful in helping you ramp fast, where you have in-depth information. Companies right now that are hiring need people to produce today, tomorrow. They don't have a training program where they can wait 2, 3, 6 months. They need impact immediately, probably because they're in crisis mode, they're in turnaround mode, they're trying to seize on the opportunity, and they've got a huge opportunity mode, whatever it is. The other kind of companies would be places where you know a lot of people. So maybe a bunch of your coworkers went to that company, you didn't go. Now might be the right time to think about it because they know you, they think highly of your work. So the point is you're creating a target list of 30 companies. Best companies to really make sure you're thinking about were your customers and vendors, partners, other companies that have worked very closely with your company. Once you have identified that list of 30 companies, I implore you to research those 30 companies until you can't imagine researching them anymore. Again, you can't do that with 300 companies. You can do it with 30. You can actually master and understand 30 companies so that when you have a conversation, which we'll get to in a few minutes, you're going to knock their socks off. And I can tell you as a headhunter for 25 years that the amount of preparation that goes into an interview is almost non-existent. You may think you prepare. Most people don't prepare at all. And the ones that do prepare, it's pretty tangential. It's 20 minutes. They looked at the company's website. That's not the kind of research I'm talking about. I mean, knowing their competitors, knowing their products, knowing their financials, knowing their management team. Pretend you're buying the company or buying the stock. And if you prepare that way, when you go into that interview, you're going to blow it away. Now, I know that takes time. I said this plan was simple, but not easy. We have nothing but time. We ain't going anywhere. We're sitting at home. Use the time to master these 30 companies. And the more these companies are off the beaten path, meaning they don't receive as many applications or as many contacts as other big name companies, the better. The internet makes it so easy to research any company, private, public, or otherwise. Understand their culture, their values, where their alumni go, what kind of products they're working on. Set up Google alerts to send you articles every time that company's in the news. Almost pretend you're a stock analyst as a full-time position. That's how you make headway on these Focus 30 companies in the event that your network didn't surface the right opportunity. Now I'm going to do a time check. We got a few more things to go through. It's going to take more than 7 minutes. I'm going as fast as I can. It's probably going to take another 10 to 15. I think this is pretty valuable. I hope you do too. And then I'll open it up to questions. So we've tracked our network and we have our list of 30 target companies. Now the challenge is to find the role. Now, in some cases, that role they may be hiring isn't advertised anywhere. Don't assume that just because you don't see a position on a website that the company is not hiring. They're too busy. They haven't got to it. Maybe it's confidential. Maybe they're planning to swap someone out and they haven't told the person yet. I see a million occasions that it's not on the website. So go for it if it interests you. But many jobs are posted. And for those, I encourage you to set up what's called daily email job alerts. You can get them on Indeed, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, almost any job board has them where they will push the job to you via email every day. Think creatively about what the job titles might be, focus on your town, etc., and you log them into a Google Sheet or Excel. Think of it as a CRM. A great salesperson would not live without a CRM system where he or she enters their leads into. You're doing the same. However, and this is where most people go wrong, is they get the email alert about the job and they click apply and apply online. If you take away nothing else from this session today, please know that clicking online to apply for a job is largely a waste of the physical energy of your finger to click apply. In most cases, they're not read. In many cases, you're going to be in a stack of 200, 300, 1,000 candidates. And in most cases, your resume is then skimmed through for keywords to get to the top of the pile, where some administrative assistant is going to go through that pack and try to pick the best people. It is a broken process, and we're not going to fix it right now on this call. So instead, I'm telling you, don't play that game. What you do is figure out through your detective work who is the hiring manager. Now, this is where your column 1 LinkedIn network comes in, because using that network, and if you know how to use LinkedIn advanced search, and if you don't, it's time to learn, you'll figure out who is at the company, or who do you know that knows people at that company. You can actually fire off a quick email or text and find out who is the hiring manager, the boss of that role. I love people in HR. Do not go through HR. The hiring manager is the person that has the pain. You are the solution to the pain, but you got to find out who that person is. If it's on your list of target 30 companies, you already know who the hiring manager is, because you know that org structure, you know how it's designed, you know everything about the company. You can use LinkedIn to kind of figure out who runs that business unit or that department or that product line. When in doubt, target the head of the function. So the VP of sales, VP marketing, CFO, and so forth. Do not click apply. Once you figure out who the hiring manager is, if you're not able to get their email address, use one of these 3 tools, Lusha, RocketReach, or HireTool. They're almost free to get the email address. So you pop in any of those 3 plugins to your browser, you go to LinkedIn, and those 3 will actually reveal the person's email address. Don't worry about how they get them. They get them. That's why you get so much unsolicited email every day. So get their email address. Type in the chat box, yes, if you're with me so far. So just refresher, we figured out your targets, your sectors. We prioritized your network, which is probably 200, 300, 500 people. We came up with the target list of 30 companies, your target 30 companies, and we figured out how to find out the roles as soon as they pop up. Okay? And if you're still interested in a company and you don't see a role, you still go after it. Now we need to reach out to that hiring manager. And again, this is where a lot of people kind of mess up. They mess up because they write a long cover letter, they attach their resume as an attachment, and they send it once. And that doesn't work. So do the opposite of what everyone else does. Number 1, send it 4 times. I mean that literally, until you get an answer. Most email marketing experts will tell you it takes 4 times before you actually get a response. I recommend every other day. Considering sending that email, consider sending it evenings and weekends when the person's inbox is not full. So it's great that you're available and sending it at 1 p.m. That person leads a department of 200 people. Their inbox is full. So send it Thursday night. Send it Sunday morning. Do not send your resume as an attachment under any circumstance. Number 1, no one's going to open it because of the fear of viruses. Number 2, most corporate email systems will scrape off any emails that have attachments. And number 3, I'll get to in a minute, which is probably the biggest issue. However, do include in your email a link to your LinkedIn profile. Now, we're going to talk about your LinkedIn profile in just a few minutes. This is where it comes in super handy because it does not require an attachment. It's a publicly viewable page. Now, the question is, and a number of you already asked me, what's in the email? And this is obviously crucial. Unlike what most people do, it is not the Gettysburg Address. It is not 5 paragraphs cover letter of your aspirations, your dreams, your hopes, why you went to school. No one cares. During this time, and this is a bit of tough love, no one cares. What they want to know is what value you can add, what value you can create for their department, for their company. How can you solve the problem? And you know the answer to that because you've done such research on these 30 target companies and you connect the dots. You know your Venn diagram. You know everything about these 30 companies. Do the math for them. Don't make them guess. And it only takes 5 sentences as a bit of a tease to get them engaged. In the email, your job is not to get the job. Your job is to get the meeting. Salespeople who sell don't send an email hoping to get the order. They send an email hoping to get the meeting, hoping to get the first call. Then on the call, you hope to get the second call, and so on and so forth until you get the close. This is Sales 101. And guess what? Because you're not the buyer right now, that means you're the seller. So you have to think like a consultative sales professional, which means if you don't know what their biggest challenge is, ask in the email. Dear Charlie, I saw that you're looking for a product manager. I may have an interest. I'm not sure. What's the biggest thing this person's going to need to tackle? Signed, Mary. He replies back, oh, cool. We're launching a new product in 6 months. I need someone that's done that before. It's all you need. Now, you know exactly that you've launched 7 products in the past that have generated a total of $300 million, and you're going to craft an email that convinces him to hop on a 20-minute Zoom video with you. That's how sales is done. And if you have to send it 4 times to get his attention with 4 slightly different messages, so be it. Let me tell you some other quick things on this topic. The subject line is vital. Any email marketing person will tell you that your subject line is everything. It drives whether they open it or delete it, and they can't hire you or have a video call with you until they open it. So your subject line needs to be differentiated, creative, not crazy, but something that intrigues them and begs curiosity so that they open that email. That is the number one thing you can do. Don't say, subject, looking for a product marketing job. No one cares. No one's going to open it. You've kind of taken all the curiosity out of it. So be creative. I'm happy to give you some, examples if you like. Second, the call to action. Every marketer knows that an ad or a contact has a call to action. What is your call to action? You are asking for or proposing a 15-minute video call. Why? 15 minutes is an amount of time that a lot of people are willing to give. It's not too intimidating like a half hour or an hour or not having the time at all. And a video call is far, far, far better than a phone call. It's not as good as in person, but guess what? In most places where you are right now, a video call is all we can do. So even if you're in the same town, a video call. If they want to do it on evenings, weekends, or you propose evenings and weekends, they got nothing to do. They're sitting around, right? They're sitting at home just like you are. Now, make it worth their time, but have a call to action, potentially evening or weekend. Now, a number of you have asked subject line examples. So I'll give you a subject line example or two. It might be launched 3 new products last year. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but that begs some curiosity. If I'm a VP of product who's about to launch new products, I'm kind of curious, what does that mean? Who launched 3 new products last year? And I open it. All you're looking to do is get the open. There's so much creativity that you can bring to it. Another would be number one fan of blank, and blank is that person's product. Now, you better be the number one fan of that product, right? You better have bought it and used it, order from Amazon and use it so you can tear it apart inside out. Or it might be 2 suggestions to improve your sales on blank. And that would be the guy's product or the hiring manager's product. And you have 2 ideas that you've thought through because you've done your research, thinking like a consultative salesperson. And you say in the email, I'm a huge fan of your product. I've got 2 ideas that I think would help you double the sales, because no one's going to buy the packaging because they're not seeing the packaging in store. They're all buying from home. And I have an idea for you, or 2, would you hop on a 15-minute call with me? You'd be shocked at how many people will take that video call. I want to keep going, and if you want more examples, we can do that. Once you get the yes, once they reply back and say, sure, I'll do a 15-minute video call with you, This is where you make sure you are prepared more than anyone else has ever prepared for a conversation. Again, you can only do that with so many opportunities. But if you research a company for 5 or 10 hours, you'll know it better than the hiring manager. You'll blow her away. You'll know the company, her industry, her issues. You'll think of stuff she hasn't thought of. Imagine how well that conversation is going to go versus you spend 5 minutes before the call looking at their website. Because your job in the 15 minutes is not to convince her to hire you. That's going to take longer, but it's going to be to convince her to invest more time with you and to have you meet the rest of the team, which probably you'll do via video as well. So to do that, it's your job to draw the connections between what you've done and what she needs and her problems. Don't make her do that work. She doesn't have time. She's managing the crisis of a century in her company. She doesn't have time to play detective. So you need to invest that time. Once you have the conversation, you understand, remember, she's seen your LinkedIn profile because you included it in your email. After the conversation, follow up and send a resume, which can be as an attachment this time. You might want to ask first, but send a dedicated, customized resume. Take your resume and spend 30 minutes making it look like you are the perfect person for this job. I call it a mirror resume. I take the job description and the company, and I create a mirror image of it. It takes 30 minutes. You're going to highlight some stuff. You're going to bold some stuff. You're probably going to move some stuff to the top. You're going to remove some stuff that's irrelevant. You're not going to make stuff up or be fictitious or lie, but you're going to position it in the best possible light so that when he or she sees that resume after a conversation that went really well, you then provide this resume that makes them say, wow, this person was like custom suited for this role, and show them how you're going to create value. Now, for most of you, these interviews are going to be on video. I've been interviewing candidates on video for about 10 years. I was an early adopter back when we used Skype. So I'll give you some things to think about. You have to check the technology. Don't trust it. Even if it's Zoom, don't trust it. Because the one time you trust it, it's going to be the time it doesn't work. You got to log in 10 minutes early. Don't worry about being early. They're not going to know how early you were on. They're going to. It's not like you arriving at the office a half hour early. It's nothing like that. But get on early. Reboot your computer, shut down all your applications, and tell your family that you need them to get off Netflix and stop backing up and watching videos to free up every bit of bandwidth in the house. Once you do that, you need to make sure that you're talking to the camera, which is very awkward. So right now I'm speaking to the camera, but if I look at my screen, I'm actually like this, and it's very off-putting. So your job is to talk at the camera, pretend that the camera eye is the hiring manager. It doesn't matter if you can see yourself. You don't need to see yourself. You know what you look like. So engage with eye contact. And probably the hardest part, which by the way is a little tiring, especially if you're an introvert, is you need to demonstrate energy. So that's hand motion, that's eye contact, that's smiling, it's being genuine. And that's hard to do. It's hard to do in person. It's really hard to do through a camera. But for 15 minutes, you got to glow. And that also means not being too far from the camera and not being too close to the camera. So think about that and get your staging right. Also make sure you're lit from the front, not lit from the top or from behind, in which case you'll be a shadow. So your lighting needs to be from the front. Think about what to wear. Non-patterns work best. Solid, dark colors work best. Anyone that has been on TV knows that. So the more patterns you have, the rougher it looks. And if you haven't done it, mock interview with someone you trust, someone outside your house, right? So get on video and have them interview you and give you feedback. What you might want to do is do it on Zoom, record it, and then watch back the recording, and you'll be shocked at how you come across. So don't let your next interview be your first time interviewing on Zoom. It is nothing like interviewing in person or on the phone. It's a totally different thing. And it's very strange in some ways. So you don't want your first one to be the real thing. Okay. Type in the chat box if this is useful, and we'll keep going. Just type yes. And I'm going to grab a sip of water. And we are almost done. I know we're 10 minutes over, but I got Just one more section to cover, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. In terms of what to wear, a few people are saying, should I wear a suit? Don't wear a suit and tie. You're at home. You will look ridiculous wearing a suit and tie. Also, don't wear a torn t-shirt, which I continue to see. So find something in the middle, and people are giving a lot of passes on what you wear, but don't wear a suit and tie. Okay. When you sit down to have the discussion on your Zoom video, there are two things you want to have already put together. The first is probably the most important thing in the job search process, and that's your SARs. What is an SAR? An SAR is a situation, action, result. Situation, action, result. So in every job you've ever held, no matter how old you are or how experienced you may be, you stepped into a job, you stepped into a situation. It may have been a turnaround, it may have been a startup, it may have been sustaining success, it may have been revenue's great, but we're not very profitable. So you stepped into some situation. Then you did a set of actions, 2 or 3 actions, not the laundry list of 80 things you did. I don't want a book report, but what are the 2 or 3 things that you did? And then what were the results? Quantifiable, demonstrable results. Even if you failed miserably, know what the results were. SAR. Having this in advance for every position you've ever held is incredibly impressive. And you're going to need it, by the way, for your LinkedIn, which we're going to get to in just a couple minutes. But you also are going to want it for your interview. Now, the best thing about Zoom interviews or video interviews is you can print it out and have it taped to the wall right next to the camera. Or you could have it on your screen next to the camera. So you have a reference guide right in front of you. And you should have it for every position you've ever held, no matter how long. Show that you made an impact. SAR, situation you stepped into, actions you took, what were the results? The second thing to have ready is your references. You do not want to be first pulling your references together when you need them. So when I, as a headhunter or a hiring manager, ask for your list of references, it's not the time to say, oh, I got to pull them together. You should have it together. So that's a list of every manager you've worked for and a few peers, maybe some investors or board members, their email address, their phone number, their title. Make it easy to get in touch with them. And then, of course, when you give out your references, quickly shoot those people an email letting them know that they might hear from this person about this opportunity and hear the things you'd like them to emphasize. In general, this is what you're up against. Your resume is one of thousands. I posted a job recently and I got 600 applications. So many that I've decided not to post jobs anymore because it's just not worth the time. Maybe you'll get 1 or 2 matches out of 600. It's not worth the time. And your LinkedIn profile is the same. So studies show that your LinkedIn profile gets an average of 6 seconds. And I know that you may have spent a lot of time on your resume, but your LinkedIn profile is arguably even more important because it's what people are going to see first. You're going to include that link instead of an attached resume to the email. And the individual is going to click on the link to see your profile. And if it doesn't nail them, in 6 seconds, you're done. You won't get a second chance. So I could do a whole session on the LinkedIn profile, but I'll give you some of the big mistakes that people make. Quantifiable metrics are hugely important. Rather than having job descriptions, right? I know you were a product manager. I know what a product manager does. I know what a director of sales does. I know what a controller does. Don't waste valuable real estate explaining the job and your responsibilities. Instead, focus on quantifiable metrics and achievements. I turned around this division by doing X and grew sales by 30%. I launched this product, which got 18,000 customers in 6 months, et cetera, et cetera. How did you create value? And we can have a long discussion about that, but you understand the point that having a LinkedIn profile, which just has jobs and titles, nothing about them, is largely a waste of time. It's a lost opportunity. Next, you get 2 photos. Most people don't know this. You got your headshot photo at the top, and then you have your background photo, which is behind your headshot. Both of those are super important. And I advise a lot of people on how to get the most out of those 2. Your LinkedIn profile also needs to address unspoken objections. So we all have unspoken objections. If you went to this school, I think you're arrogant because people from that school are arrogant. If you worked in this industry for 6 years, I am worried you won't be able to switch to this industry and understand it. So there's unspoken objections, and your LinkedIn profile, believe it or not, needs to find a way to proactively address those unspoken objections. And there's ways to do that through your messaging, through your copy, through your image at the top. It all hangs together. It's marketing 101. In general, when in doubt, leave it out. Meaning, if it's not going to make the difference and not going to get you the interview, then leave it out because it's just taking up space. Again, you get 6 seconds. Don't waste valuable text and copy. Even get rid of the words a and the, right? Make sure in 6 seconds that the person sees it. And I've seen hundreds of thousands of LinkedIn profiles in my day. And I'd say 80 and 90% fail that test. Tell the story in 6 seconds. I understand everyone is nervous right now, and a lot of people are paralyzed. But that is not a path that's going to work. If you wait for the economic storm to pass, I think you're going to be waiting quite some time. And more importantly, you're going to be the last one to find that port in the storm. It's almost like musical chairs. The one who is still standing at the end loses. So don't be that person. Don't get paralyzed. Take action now. And I summarized here, and I'll open up for questions in a minute, kind of what you want to do. If you're currently working, if it's possible, stay there. You have a port in the storm. Start working on your network to make your next move. Certainly be very generous, right? Make introductions, do favors, donate, give blood. You're one of the lucky ones. If you're currently working, but you're nervous, now is the time to take action. Don't wait another day. Have your Venn diagram, your networking list by Friday, your target 30 list, and go. Every day or week that you wait, you're putting yourself at more risk. And if you're not working, if you're in between gigs or maybe you're graduating school, be very clear on what your minimum viable position is, the least you're willing to accept. And I don't just mean money. And accept the first one that clears that bar. Because a bird in the hand may be worth 5 in the bush. And you may really regret that if you turn it down, you could be waiting months to find that next one. This is not 30 days ago when you turned it down an offer and there was another one in 3 days. We won't be back to those days for quite some time. So I'm not saying settle. I'm not saying say take something crappy, but define that MVP for yourself, the comp, the location, the role, the title, and the first one that clears that opportunity that you do your due diligence on and you make sure the balance sheet is strong and you make sure the cash is there, take that job. Now, one last thing. If you're not working, or even if you are, taking project work, side gigs, moonlighting gigs in the meantime can really build your confidence because it keeps some money coming in and it gives you the ability to raise that MVP because you're under less pressure to accept something. It also shows on your LinkedIn profile that you're doing something, that you're actively in the market, that you're working. And it's human psychology, but people want what they can't have. So if it looks like you've been laying around or out of work for 3 months, or you're in school, it just adds a lot more impact to show that you're currently working, even if it's part-time. So that's one more thing I would add on that last column. Now, there's no substitute for having an advisor through this process. I encourage you to get a consigliere, someone who will be honest with you, like I've tried to be for the past hour, someone who will be no BS. It usually can't be a spouse or a friend or a partner because they're biased. They're on your side. They won't give it to you straight. They'll tell you what you want to hear. So getting an objective consigliere is so useful. For that reason, I set up just during this crazy time period, a very quick down and dirty service, and I call it LinkedIn Makeover. And basically, you can meet with me one-on-one via video. So just like we're doing today, except it would be one-on-one, just you and me. And we meet for 30 minutes, and you don't get my staff or anything. You get me for 30 minutes. And as you can tell, I'm pretty no BS. You get a copy of that session and just 30 minutes. So it's really high impact because I want to do as many of these as I can. So I keep it to 30 minutes. And we're going to go through your LinkedIn profile. And I'm going to help you make sure that it is discoverable, because your resume is great and that's awesome, but that's too late in the process. The LinkedIn profile is the first way people are going to discover you. It's the first thing they click on, and you're going to be including a link to it in your email. So it has to tell your story in 6 seconds. And it should, if you've done it properly with the impact, with the quantifiable achievements, with the SARs, it should ensure that you get the meeting. And once you get the meeting, you're off to the races. What I won't do is work with people who will wallow, right? I'm not going to do it. I don't have the patience. And for those of you that know me, I just can't do it. But if you're willing to just engage and do these things, I'll do it with you for 30 minutes. The price is $250. So it's a flat fee. And we spend a half hour together. You get a recording of it. And then once you make the changes to your LinkedIn, you send it to me and I'll let you know how you did and if there's anything else that needs to change. It is a huge, huge, valuable tool. And it's the number one place now that people are going to look. So it's called LinkedIn Makeover. If you're interested, just go to recruitrockstars.com/job. So again, recruitrockstars.com, that's the name of the book, /job. And you can book a time that works for you and we'll do it. But for now, I want to open it up to Q&A. I'll stay on as long as I can, as long as you want. Just type your questions in the chat box and I'll get to as many of them as I can. So just start typing in the chat box. And I've never done this LinkedIn makeover before. I created it just for this time period because it seems like a lot of people need the help. Okay, there's a lot of questions. So why don't we start? Hiring managers only want, this is from Joan. Hiring managers only want someone who has already done that exact role and recently, not outside the box. Fact or myth? During economic times, that is a fact. This is not a great time to change locations, to change industries, or change functions. If you're lucky, you might be able to change one of the three. But your ideal scenario of changing companies, changing industries, changing jobs, changing functions, changing city, unlikely to happen. And the reason is not because of anything you've done. It's the reality that we're dealing with, which is companies need someone who can hit the ground tomorrow. There's no ramp up time. And most companies won't take that risk of someone that maybe could do it, but maybe can't. And so now may not be the time to make that change in your next move. What could be examples for a couple sentences for the company problem? So when you email the hiring manager, you've done all the research. You know what their biggest problems are. You've read every article about the company and the industry. You know that their sales in healthcare are booming, but their sales in this channel are diving because restaurants are closed and 20% of their revenues are restaurants. But you have ideas on how to change that, and you have worked in that segment before. That's your 5 sentences. I understand that your revenues are down 18%. It's really tragic what's happened to restaurants. Fortunately, I've got 3 ideas I'd love to discuss them with you. When can we set up a 15-minute video call? That's 5 sentences. Next question from Craig. Since it may be harder to find your dream job, does it still make sense to be so targeted? Yes, it is even more targeted. Don't mistake dream job for your target. This may not be the time to go after your dream job. Sure, have a dream, but also understand your MVP, your minimum viable position that you're willing to take. And then I'm telling you to take the first thing that clears that bar. And to do that, you do need to have targets. Next question is with Amit. I'm interviewing with Amazon tomorrow for a manager role. It's in Virginia. We'll need to fly for classes. Is it worth the risk? I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to answer the question. But I would encourage you to really think about the practical questions of commuting, right, on airplanes, and your personal willingness to do that. And then you got to make your own decision. Everyone's in a different boat on that. Next question from Blair. When asking for a video call, do you like tools such as Calendly that lets them schedule a call? I actually find those to be kind of annoying. I understand it's convenient for you, but it kind of comes across as kind of arrogant, like you're so busy, pick a time. Just when you get a hiring manager that wants to speak to you, ask them what time works for them, and then clear your calendar and meet them at that time. So keep it easy. Do we send the same 4 emails the same time? Oh, do we send the same email 4 times? Certainly don't send the same subject line, right? If the first subject line didn't work the first time, they're not going to open it the second time. So certainly 4 different subject lines. And be a bit of a marketer. Test to see what gets the best response and use and standardize on that subject line. What's the best way to handle salary expectations? So look, normally when the individual is the buyer, the seller rather, meaning in a tight job market, my advice is don't answer the question. He who answers that question first loses. However, you're no longer the buyer, you're the seller. And they're not going to want you to waste their time by being cagey. So I would give them a non-answer answer. The first is, compensation is really important to me. However, it's only one of a bunch of things that are important. I'm also interested in what I'm going to learn and who I'm going to work with and the culture, etc. So it's really only one consideration. It's probably not my biggest one, but you've answered with a non-answer. If they then follow up and say, that's great, how much do you expect to make? Then you need to come up with an answer that's not going to be annoying. And what I would recommend is a range. And that range is, on the low end, the lowest number that you're willing to accept. Don't give a number lower than that. But understand you may get that number. So be very mindful of that number. And on the high end is the most money you've made over a 12-month period in the past 5 years. And what I found with most people is that range is pretty big. It's like X and 2X, and give them that range. So over the past 5 years, my comp has ranged from X to Y. And that's a good enough answer to give them. What do I think will be the reasonable time to spend researching 30 companies? Like I said, every spare minute. If you're serious about this process, now there's ways to make it easy with alerts.google.com, which will send you all the news on every company and every press release on every company. You're studying the financials, you're studying the LinkedIn, you're watching videos on YouTube. 5, 10, 20 hours per company is not too much. I know that sounds like a lot, but when you go into an interview, you get one shot. Now, I would spend some time, and then when you do get someone that says, I'll take a 15-minute video call with you, then you could spend, 10 more hours. So prioritize your time accordingly. Next question. After 2 minutes of interviews, I got a job with Amazon. Sounds like Amazon's hiring a lot of people, which aligns to my career goal through referral. Is that a good deal? I am worried about your statement that you don't have to change jobs. Oh, this person, and I resigned today. If you already resigned, then you're done. So you've already made your decision. So I would not resign and then go back to your previous job. And if it's Amazon, you're in pretty good shape because their balance sheet is strong enough. Ideals for a personal CRM. Yes, there are cheap and free online CRM tools. You could use Excel or Google Sheets, but if you really want a, CRM system to track all your leads, there's a ton of them. Just search for personal CRM or free CRM. If you're fresh out of school without much real world experience, this is a good time to pursue an advanced degree. It's a great question. And the answer is, you do find during economic downturns that grad schools do really well. A lot of people go to grad school during down times. And there's a reason for that. And that is, obviously, there's fewer jobs out there. It's a great port in a storm. So there's a lot of logic to that. Now, that assumes you really are thinking about going to school. Don't just go for the heck of it. And if you can afford it, I wouldn't put yourself in more debt. But it's a good time to go back to school and sharpen your saw and gain new skills and wait out this economic tsunami, but at least have a plan of why you want to do that. Next, I am planning to change my job in a year. How should I plan my year? A year is an eternity right now. this month working from home has felt like an eternity. As always, dig your well before you're thirsty. So work on your network, because that's how you're going to find your next role. Kick ass and do a great job with quantifiable achievements in your current role. And then, of course, spend time on your Venn diagram and your target companies of what really turns you on. But just know that in the next year, things are going to change a lot. New companies, new industries will be born in the next year, and others will die in the next year. Next question. I want a free copy of the book. Yes, if you want a free copy of the book, go to recruitrockstars.com/book, and you can get a free copy of the book. Let's see. If the contact would, I don't understand the question. Something about evenings and weekends. Yes, if the contact wants to meet evenings and weekends, do it. Can I get a copy of this? Yes, you'll get a email with a video of this session. I was counseled to not provide references until there's an offer on the table. Don't want to waste their time. You're not going to be wasting their time. I am blown away when a candidate gives me their list of references before I even ask. It says so much about their confidence in their ability. And I already know those references are going to be great. Now, of course, I also do backdoor references, which if you haven't read Chapter 7, make sure you read Chapter 7 about backdoor references, which people find on LinkedIn. And that's what my clients pay me to do. But there's nothing wrong with providing your references before they're asked. If your industry is in trouble, how do you reconcile the comment about this not being the time to change industries? What I meant was, and this is Zarek, if your industry and your company are doing well. I said if it's a tolerable situation. If your company is in trouble, your industry is in trouble, I would define that as not a tolerable situation. But see if you can pivot, versus just randomly finding some other sector that's doing well. See if there is a sector or industry that is connected to yours, maybe vendors or customers that are connected, but they're out of the bullseye of the storm. Next question. What is a reasonable salary cut versus current averages we should suggest when asked by recruiters regarding salary expectations? Well, this is from Maria. I don't know that I would think about it like a salary cut, although I do see people taking salary cuts right now, just to be very clear. I'd again start with that range that you give. So try to avoid the question altogether. But if you have to answer it, you give a range, and the bottom of the range is the lowest you're willing to take. But you have to be very clear with the person that it depends on salary, bonus. What's the bonus based on? Is it individual bonus or company bonus? Is it subjective or objective? Is there equity, right? What are the healthcare benefits? It's the totality of the package. Salary is only one piece. Even if your salary goes down, you may make it up in other ways. And then give that range that I described earlier. For someone with a BS degree looking to change industries, would you say this is a good time to consider an MBA? So as I said a few minutes ago, Allison, great time to go to school for the next year or two to wait out the storm, but do it for a reason. Don't just do it to avoid the storm, but there's a lot of reasons to go to school for the next year or two until things settle down. It's not a bad idea. Dusty, I found a posting that was taken down. I reached out to the CEO and was informed the job is on ice. They hinted 3 months. It's my dream job. Should I offer to come on board as a contractor for 3 months at a lower comp? Dusty, I think it's great. If you're able to and willing to, go there and work contract. Go there and work for free. Say, look, I'll work on the come for the first 2 months at no cost. And then you agree, if I kick gas, that you're going to hire me. I bet there's a lot of CEOs that would take that offer. Now, you got to deliver and you got to agree on what success looks like. But absolutely, if you've got nothing better to do, you've got nothing to lose. You probably also want to still be looking for another job in the background, of course. Next, what are your thoughts on the current timing to start an online e-commerce business for supplemental income? That's from Ted. I love it. This economic cycle and health crisis are doing nothing but accelerating the use of e-commerce, which still only makes up about 11% of total commerce in the U.S. You got large retailers like JCPenney's about to file for bankruptcy, Bed Bath & Beyond about to file for bankruptcy. If you have a niche, now you got to carve out a niche. I'm not going to do an e-commerce class right here, but if you've got a reason to believe that you can break through in a non-commodity product, knowing that you're going to have to find a way to beat Amazon, don't play their game, then sure, it's a great idea. Elaine, what are your thoughts on smaller consulting firms in this economy? Are they likely to struggle based on your research? So Elaine, it depends on who that consulting firm's customers are and how those customers are doing. So if I'm a consulting firm that advises hospitals on how to move their equipment around, I'm doing really well right now. If I'm a consulting firm that generates leads for restaurants, I'm not doing well right now because all my customers are about to go out of business or at least are closed. So it's not the size of the consulting firm, although in general, I do like small consulting firms. If they have a very specific niche and their target customers or clients are doing well. Next question. Thanks for all the questions, guys. This is great. Peter, what's your 2 cents for someone who's only worked in the industry that's declined the most? Wow. Probably what I said earlier, which is try to find some adjacency. So rather than pick a random far off target that no one's going to want to take the bet that you can make that change, find some other industry that's connected to that industry, whatever it is. I'm guessing restaurants or bars, whatever, but and try to, make a compelling argument that what you know about this industry can be leveraged immediately into value creation for that new company. How should we close the 15-minute call? Oh, that's great. So you get the 15-minute video call and you have your little egg timer where your Apple Watch, and in 15 minutes you say, hey, Frank, I'm really enjoying this discussion. I think I can add immense value, but I did say 15 minutes and I want to be respectful of your time. Would you like to keep going? Or would you prefer to set up another time to continue our discussion? And then you shut up. That is a win-win question. Because either he's going to say, no, that's fine, let's keep talking, which is a win. Or he says, yeah, you're right, I need to go, let's set up another time, which is also a win. So Sahad, that would be my ask. Okay, next question from Michael. Regarding a port in the storm, I understand the recommendation for those seeking employment. Sometimes a step down position is a gating variable to even the opportunity to be considered. If you are open to taking a step down, then there may be times you actually want to tone down the titles or the experience in your resume or LinkedIn so you don't scare people off. I've seen people do that. There are people, hiring managers, that will be concerned that you are overqualified. So understand what your MVP is and what your target is, and then think about your messaging. And if we work together on your LinkedIn profile, we can make sure it shows some flexibility, right? So that it doesn't scare people off. Because you do need to overcome some of those very traditional conventions that some people have. Dennis, when the interview panel asks, do you have any questions for us? What sort of questions do you ask? You have 2 or 3 questions that are genuine, that are based on the 10 or 20 hours of research that you've done. So they are clearly insightful, and they are about the business impact of the role that you are discussing. They're not about your benefits or your gym or any of that stuff. So they show that you are already thinking about doing the job. You're already doing the job in your mind. That is incredibly impressive, but don't have a laundry list of questions. It's 2 or 3. And the point is not to make yourself look smart. The point is, or to seem like you're smart. The point is to show that you're already in your mind doing the job. Okay, next question is Deepa. At what stage should you reveal to the hiring manager that you're in between jobs or laid off? You've got the biggest air cover in the history of mankind since the Great Depression. So I don't think it's going to scare people off. If you just left a company, then when they see your LinkedIn, they'll assume you're still working. And then you have a conversation. You say, you know what, I just wrapped up with this company. they're going through a very difficult time. So 20% of people were cut. No one's going to blink twice. If obviously you left a year ago, then do not make it seem like you're still working, because as soon as you reveal that you're not, they're going to feel that you've been misleading. So it kind of depends on how long that duration has been. Should we offer a video platform like Zoom or Google Hangouts, or have them use their preferred? You should have your own account ready to go. I prefer Zoom. It's all that I use. I use this Webinar Jam for webinars, but I use Zoom, and I've tried them all. So I would use Zoom. But if they prefer their own, then of course use their own. And that's from Russell. Next question from Scott. How do you keep your job search confidential from your current employer? You be very careful, and you measure twice and cut once, and you're targeting 30 specific companies. And when you reach out to people, you stress that this is confidential, and you understand that your company may find out. That is a risk you take. I can't eliminate that risk, but if you're smart and mindful, you can reduce that risk substantially. Now, if you click apply to a ton of jobs online, then you're at risk of letting the cat out of the bag. What are LinkedIn backgrounds important, and what matters? I don't understand the question, Joan. So if you could ask that again, that'd be great. This is from E. I'm looking at a opportunity with a private company. I'm having trouble finding information. Any tips for research? Yes. Don't forget, YouTube has a ton of videos. Don't forget Glassdoor has a ton of employee feedback. LinkedIn itself, you can map out the organization, and you can make some really good, you can get some really good understanding of who their customers are and what their focus is. Play detective. If it's venture capital or private equity funded, then I recommend crunchbase.com, which is a few $100 a month, but a great database for private companies. Samantha, for the email subject line, what's the difference between catchy and being direct? I can see how a catchy subject line may get the open, but the receiver may feel deceived. So the key is, as in email marketing, which all this is, your subject line, which has to get the open, should immediately tie to the payoff, which is the first thing they read when they open the email. So if I use bait and switch, they're just going to be pissed off, and you're right, they're going to delete it. But if it's two ideas on how you can improve the revenue of X is their product line. Hey, Frank, I'm a huge fan of your product, and I've come up with 2 specific ways to increase your revenue. I'm sure you haven't thought of these because, I've got a patent or whatever, and I'd love to talk about them. Could we do a 15-minute Zoom video? So make sure that they connect. Dennis, I'm not working currently with online courses to build soft skills. Do you recommend? I don't know what you mean by soft skills. I assume that means communication skills. Dennis, I would need more information on what you mean. Salman, I have interviewed with a local healthcare company. I'm waiting for an offer. I learned the company wants to go with contract to hire versus full-time. Should I be concerned? Well, there could be some very valid reasons they want to do contract, and you can ask those, and then you make your own decision. Look, contract and consulting can be ended just as easily as full-time hires can be ended. So unless you're under a management contract with a severance and a buyout, we all work at will, at least here in the US. So I wouldn't be overly concerned, but I would ask why. And potentially it's around them not wanting to pay benefits. How do I think about PayPal stability in this crisis? Is that a company worth starting a new role these days? I haven't studied their balance sheet lately. In general, the online payments companies are doing incredibly well. Square and PayPal and the others, but definitely you want to dig into it to make sure, that the analysts agree with that. But it's hard for me to envision a scenario where they don't do at least relatively well during this session or during this economy. Next question is from JJ. I'm targeting big tech next year. Given my current situation for summer internship this summer, is it okay to accept a startup job offer, even if it's not big for? Yes. I'm assuming this person, JJ, is at a school, like a 2-year MBA school. And, right now, big tech is hiring way more than startups. But if you've got a bird in the hand and a startup offer, I would think twice about passing it up. As long as you make a good impact and do a great job, it'll do nothing but help you for next year. Next question from Sophia. There are companies who hire as interview. Perhaps Dusty can do that. Propose it as going on an interview. That's a good point, referencing Dusty's question earlier. Marianne, how does Gen X do in this scenario? Are age and experience viewed more favorably during downturn market? I can't say that I have any data to back this up, but I would say that anything you can do to demonstrate that you can solve the problem and add value tomorrow immediately will help. And so therefore, logic would say the more experience you have, the better. Now, there are always going to be ageist and racist and everything else in interviewing. But if the hiring manager can be convinced by you that your 20 years of experience in doing X, Y, Z means I will ramp up by tomorrow afternoon, that should be a win. How should we organize? This is from Risha. How do we organize the 15-minute call? How many minutes for small talk? Once you get the individual on the phone, thank them for their time. I was so glad to get your response and glad that you were open to hearing my ideas. Before I go into them, again, take charge of the discussion. I'd love to understand just kind of what was it about it that was most interesting to you, or kind of tell me a little about the current situation. Of course, demonstrate some empathy. I hope that you and your family are safe and that you're, haven't had any health issues. And then kind of get into it. You got 15 minutes, so you want to hit it hard. This is the next one from Jay. After the 15-minute video call, you show how you can add value to the problems. How do you transition that you'd like to apply for a role in the mere resume email? So you ask their advice. People love to be asked their advice. It appeals to our ego. And so during the discussion, Frank, this has been immensely helpful. I really appreciate it. I'd love to get some advice. I think I can add this kind of value in so many ways at the company. And I'd love to talk to someone about that. Who do you recommend? Who in the business makes that decision about hiring? And he'll say, oh, that's Charlie. I'll introduce you to him. I say, great. What can I send you? And he'll say, oh, send me your resume. Say, awesome. Then you customize that resume based on your conversation, and you got an inside track. Next, from Lou, if you're furloughed, is it okay to reflect that you still work at the current company? Yes. If that happens for 2 years, that's a different issue. But if it's been 2 weeks or 2 months, fine. From Joan, if you have more years of experience than they asked, do you apply? Yes, of course. Well, you never click on apply. We talked about that. Maybe that was a trick question. So you still go for it. You never let your experience be a deterrent, but you position it in the best possible light and why it's going to help them. From Peggy, do you feel like LinkedIn Premium is worth the cost? No, I don't, unless you're a recruiter. Russell, since you're a headhunter and the focus should be made on personal network, is there any value to engage or continue engaging with headhunters? I would not recommend you spend a lot of time on headhunters right now. Most headhunters are seeing significant drops in their business. I focus on private equity and VC companies, so I'm fortunate that I'm doing well. Others, not so much. But the bigger issue, which is true even during good economy times, is that because the company is retained by the employer, they're not your career coach. They don't go to bat for you. So unless you can specifically fill one of the searches they're working on in the next 30, 60 days, they're not just going to spend time. Next question from Jeff. Should LinkedIn photo be professional? Yes, but right now you can't get a professional headshot taken. So have someone in your family, probably a millennial, take 20 pictures and then you pick the best one. Okay, we are out of time. We're out of questions. Let me thank you for your time, and I wish you the best. And I hope this has been useful. And I will send you a replay. And please be well.